The forest at night has a way of breathing. The branches sway softly, but the sound carries too far, echoing in ways it shouldn't. I remember walking the narrow trail with my flashlight, its beam cutting through fog that hung low across the ground. Every step crunched against damp earth, yet I felt as if something else matched my pace just out of sight. The silence pressed down in strange rhythms, broken only by the occasional snap of twigs, too heavy to be dear. My light flickered, the batteries trembling against their casing, and for a moment the woods were swallowed in black. When the beam returned, the trees looked closer, leaning inward as though listening. That's when I heard it, a sound that wasn't quite a howl, and not quite a growl, rising from somewhere deep in the fog. It carried an unnatural echo, almost like a voice straining to escape a throat that didn't belong to it. I froze, trying to convince myself it was the wind or some restless animal. But the sound came again, closer, heavier, pulling breath from the shadows. And when I turned the light toward the trail ahead, I realized I wasn't walking alone anymore. The ridge was quiet. Cold air pressed against my skin, carrying the scent of wet pine and stone. Dusk was folding over the mountains, pale light sliding between jagged peaks. I had been hiking alone for hours. Every step sank softly into the dirt, the crunch muffled by damp leaves. The wind whispered through the needles above, like distant voices I'd almost recognized. Then I heard it, a low howl, rolling across the ridge. At first, it was faint somewhere down the valley, but it didn't stay simple. It grew, twisting, stretching, a strange layering in its tone, almost human. I stopped. My breath came out in foggy bursts, mingling with the cold evening air. The echo bounced from ridge to ridge, folding back onto itself. Each repetition seemed to carry a voice I knew, or thought I knew, my own name hiding in the sound. Shadows gathered in the corners of my vision. Rocks and trees shifted shapes, caught between light and darkness. I wanted to move forward. Curiosity pressed at me, but so did fear, a heavy, settling weight. The howl stretched longer, warping higher, then lower like something in pain or something mocking. It layered again with a rasping human edge. I felt it in my chest, a resonance I couldn't shake, like it was speaking to the spaces between my bones. I glanced around the ridge. No movement, but the shadows seemed alive. A branch scraped against stone. I flinched. The sound was too precise, deliberate, then silence swallowed it. The wind stilled. Even the faint rustle of leaves had vanished. Only the echo of that first howl remained, lingering, soft, insistent, beckoning. I forced myself to keep walking. The trail curved along the ridge, slick with damp earth. Every step felt heavier, my boots sinking into something that might have been mud or something else. Each breath left mist in the cooling air. I could hear behind me, faint now, shifting from howl to whisper, as if the wind itself had teeth. I reached a clearing, pale light spilling over jagged rocks. The ridge fell away into shadow below. Silence, almost complete. But then the howl returned, closer, the human edge more pronounced, stretching out my name again. I froze. It didn't echo this time. It was there, direct, deliberate, patient. I swallowed. My tongue fell heavy. My pulse drummed in my ears. The ridge seemed endless, yet the howl was right there, looming along every shadowed curve. I could feel eyes, though none appeared. The hair along my neck stood stiff, prickling in the fading light. I wanted to call out, to break the spell, but no sound came. The wind rose again, cold and rough. The howl faded slowly into the distance, dragging with it something I couldn't name. The echo left a hollow inside me, where warmth and certainty had been. I sat on a stone, knees pulled close, and listened. Even far away, it lingered, soft, distorted, human-like. It wasn't gone, and I knew it would return. The ridge was silent once more. Only my shallow breaths broke the night. I stayed until the sky darkened completely, and the memory of that howl pressed against my mind, like a hand that would not let go. Rain fell in slow, steady sheets, soft against the leaves and wet earth. The trail was slippery, mud clinging to my boots as I trudged forward. The forest smelled damp and deep, soil and pine mixing with a faint tang of moss. I had stopped to set up camp. The small clearing was quiet, aside from the rhythmic patter of rain. I could hear droplets gathering on leaves, sliding down the ground, a gentle, persistent hum. That's when I noticed them. Fresh pawprints pressed into the mud, too large, too deep. They formed a perfect circle around my small tent. I froze, tracing their edges with my eyes. No accompanying prints, nothing to explain them. The rain blurred the trail. Mist rose from the soil, curling around the trees. I crouched, pressing my hands into the mud. It was soft, wet, and strangely warm, as if something had only just passed. The forest was silent. No bird, no rustle, no insect dared to disturb the circle of prints. I wanted to call out, to laugh it off, but the silence felt deliberate, waiting. I tried to follow the tracks. They led away from the tent, then circled back, always returning. Perfect symmetry, as if someone or something was studying me. The shadows between trees thickened, dark shapes pooling in the corners of my vision. A branch snapped under its own weight, or maybe under something unseen. I jerked my head toward it, heart thudding. Nothing, only the rain, the mud, and the lingering outline of footprints. I could feel them watching, though no eyes appeared. Each exhale left a cloud in the air, only to be swallowed by fog creeping from the low ground. I held my breath, listening to soft, subtle shifts. The prints seemed to hum with presence, as if alive. I returned to the tent, hands shaking as I zipped it closed. The smell hit me first, wet fur, musk, something primal and thick. I pressed my back against the canvas, eyes scanning the darkening tree-line. The prints were still there, circling endlessly. Minutes passed, or hours. Time had no weight, only the rhythm of rain and the silent, deliberate paw prints. I dared not move. Any sound might draw the thing closer. Then I thought I heard breathing, soft, measured, echoing across the clearing. It wasn't human, not fully, and it didn't belong to anything I knew. The circle tightened in my mind. A shape formed in the mist between trees, half seen, shifting with the rain. I blinked. It vanished. I stayed inside, listening to the rain, to the soft, endless circling of prints pressed into mud, to the unspoken patience of something waiting just beyond the edge of light. By morning, the rain had stopped. The mud was firm, leaving the prints like scars on the earth. I left quickly, boots squelching, eyes darting. The circle remained, and I knew somehow it would wait for the next traveler. The fire flickered. Warm light pushed back the shadows, soft and pale against the trees. I sat close, boots muddy, hands pressed to my knees, feeling the damp chill of the evening settle in my bones. The forest beyond the clearing was still. Branches swayed with the occasional gust, but otherwise silence. I could hear the hum of the fire, the soft crackle as it consumed dry wood. Then I saw them, two golden eyes, reflecting the firelight, just beyond the tree-line. They didn't move at first, just watched. I froze. The warmth of the fire felt fragile, like a thin skin between me and the dark. The eyes blinked slowly, deliberate, unblinking in the shadows. Every nerve in my body tightened. I reached for a stick, tossing it into the fire. The flame leapt higher, dancing across the clearing. When it settled, the eyes had multiplied. Several pairs, shifting in the undergrowth, circling the fire without making a sound. The night was still, yet the sensation of being watched pressed on me from every angle. I strained to see through the darkness, but the shapes were clever, keeping themselves just beyond the edge of light. The smell hit next. Earth and musk, wet fur and something older, metallic, faint but undeniable. I drew a breath, sharp, mist curling in front of my face. I could hear soft footsteps, or perhaps no footsteps at all, only the faint rustle of movement. I tried to look away, to ignore the gaze, but they were everywhere now, glimmering eyes peering from hollows and behind trunks, reflecting the campfire's flicker. Every flicker made them multiply, then vanish, then reappear just beyond the firelight. A branch snapped. I jumped. Nothing moved, yet I felt the weight of presence, heavy, deliberate, patient. The eyes remained, locked on me, their golden gleam steady. The fire guttered. Shadows stretched, twisted. I could see pale shapes flitting between trees, quick and smooth, their movements deliberate, testing the space around the clearing. I held my breath. The hum of the fire became a pulse in my chest, echoing the rhythm of something alive beyond the tree lean. The golden eyes didn't blink anymore. They waited, unyielding. I whispered to myself. No sound came from the darkness, yet I felt a response in the air, a tension that pressed against my skin, soft and invasive, like static over my thoughts. Minutes, or hours, passed. The fire burned lower, embers soft and red. The eyes didn't leave. They lingered at the edge, patient, waiting for the flicker that would reveal me completely. Eventually, I blew out the fire. Darkness fell instantly, thick and absolute. The golden eyes vanished, or perhaps I could no longer see them. I felt their gaze lingering anyway, heavy in the wet night air. I didn't sleep. I sat among shadows and silence, listening to forest breathe, knowing something watched, always, just beyond the reach of light. The cabin sat at the edge of the clearing, wooden walls dark with age and rain. Even in daylight, it seemed heavier than it should, leaning slightly, as if it carried some quiet weight. The forest pressed close, branches brushing against the roof, leaves murmuring with every breeze. I had come to rest, to escape the ridge and its echoing howls. Inside, the air smelled of damp wood and pine sap. The floorboards creaked underfoot, faint and hollow, like the cabin itself was breathing. The first morning, I noticed them, deep claw marks etched across the door, jagged, raw, slicing into wood in a pattern that seemed almost deliberate. I leaned closer, tracing the grooves with fingertip. No tracks led away. Nothing suggested how the marks had been made. I stepped outside, searching the perimeter. Mud was disturbed here and there, but nothing matched the size. Nothing explained the scratches. The forest was silent, except for the occasional hum of wind through the pine needles. The next morning, the marks had grown, deeper now, almost clawing their way outward, as if something had tested the wood while I slept. I couldn't bring myself to touch them this time. The thought of what had made them linger too close to the skin. Inside, the cabin felt smaller. Shadows stretched along the walls, pale light from the small window failing to reach the corners. Every creak of timber, every gust through a crack in the wall made my heart jump. I tried to leave. The forest outside should have welcomed me, but it felt oppressive, closed in. Branches seemed to reach, brushing against my arms, snagging at clothing. The scratches on the door seemed to pulse with memory, something patient and waiting. That night, I slept fitfully. Dreams dragged me back to the scratches, showing hands or claws, pressing, testing, waiting. I woke to silence, only the faint hum of the forest beyond the walls. Morning brought no comfort. The marks had multiplied again. Deep grooves now etched across the doorframe, stretching toward the hinges. They were precise, methodical. No animal, no wind could make such patterns. I left the cabin soon after. The door remained marked, scarred with something unexplainable. I walked through the trees, leaving it behind, but the memory of the scratches stayed with me. A quiet weight, an ache along my spine, a reminder that some things reach for you even when you are alone. The forest had a rhythm that evening. Branches swayed, droplets clinging to needles, and the trail stretched ahead like a ribbon disappearing into shadow. The air smelled damp, earthy, with the faint tang of rotting leaves. I walked slowly, boots sinking into soft soil, each step leaving a fleeting mark. The light was fading. Pale gray filtered to the canopy, and the fog was creeping low along the trail. It felt heavier than it should. After a while, I realized something strange. The trail curved, then straightened, then curved again, and yet the clearing I had passed hours ago appeared ahead. The same stones, the same twisted roots, the same lone pine leaning over the path. I stopped. A shiver slid down my spine. I had not noticed it before, but the wind had shifted strangely. A whisper of movement, faint and deliberate, brushed past my ears. The fog thickened, curling around my legs, hiding the trail behind me. I tried to turn, to find a different path. But no matter which way I walked, the clearing returned. Again and again, every loop, the trees pressed closer. Every loop, the air grew heavier, damp with mist and something unseen. Then I heard it. Howls. Soft at first, drifting from somewhere deeper in the forest. They stretched and twisted, lingering too long, echoing just beyond the reach of sight. And with every repetition, they seemed closer, more urgent, layered with a tone that was not quite animal. I followed the trail, boots wet, heart hammering. Branches scraped my arms, leaves slapped my face, but I could not stop. The fog curled at my ankles, pulling me forward, insisting I stay on the path that would never end. The forest seemed alive around me. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, folding over themselves, then retreating when I blinked. A low hum seemed to vibrate through the soil, through the mist, through me. The clearing appeared again, exactly as before. And this time, I noticed a shape just beyond the trees. A tall figure, blurred in the fog, shifting in jerking motions. Half human, half beast, or perhaps something in between. I froze, breath visible in the cold, damp air. It didn't move toward me, not yet. But the howls grew sharper, closer, layering my name into the wind, as though the forest itself had learned to speak. Panic edged at me, though I tried to remain calm. I stepped back, then forward, and the loop repeated. Every step took me nowhere. Every turn returned me to the same clearing, the same fog, the same unseen watcher. Night fell fully, and the howls persisted, stretching and twisting through the trees, circling me, pressing closer with each repetition. I finally stopped. The trail would not let me leave. The forest hummed around me, alive and patient, and I realized some paths are not meant to be followed. Dusk settled over the ridge. The sky was bruised with purple and gray, fading light leaking between the peaks. The wind pressed against my face, carrying the chill of approaching night. I stopped to catch my breath, boots sinking into loose stone. The forest below was quiet, leaves trembling softly in the breeze. Everything felt still, as if the world itself had paused. Then I saw it, a figure on the hilltop, tall, impossibly tall, pacing slowly along the ridge. Its outline shifted in jerking motions, uneven, unnatural. I squinted against the fading light. Half human, half beast, or perhaps something that could not be described in either term. The muscles moved in ways that shouldn't exist, joints bending with sharp, unsettling rhythm. I want to call out, but my voice caught in my throat. My chest tightened as I watched. The figure paused, tilting its head, as if it had noticed me, though the distance was impossible to bridge with sight alone. Shadows stretched along the ridge, folding over themselves, mirroring the figure's movements. Every step it took seemed measured, deliberate, almost curious. I could hear nothing, no crunch of stone, no snap of branches, only the soften of the wind over the peaks. The light dimmed further. The ridge grew sharper in contrast, the figure more defined against a bruised sky. Its head jerked unnaturally, one movement jerking, then a pause, and then the next. Half-human hands flexing, claws catching the last light. I shivered, pressing my arms close. The air tasted metallic, faint copper mingling with the chill. My boots crunch on gravel as I stepped backward, slow, careful. The figure didn't hurry. It didn't vanish. It simply continued, pacing the ridge. A branch snapped somewhere behind me. I turned. Nothing. When I looked back to the hilltop, the shape had shifted slightly closer. The jerking motions more pronounced, deliberate, almost studying me. The forest below swallowed every other sound. The wind grew colder. Every shadow seemed alive, stretching toward me, but the figure stayed above, pacing, patient. I dared not move again. I watched until darkness swallowed the ridge completely, and the shape vanished from sight, or perhaps blended into the night. Even then, I could feel its presence. The ridge held it in memory. Every gust of wind, every rustle of leaves, echoed the figure's jerking, deliberate motion. I left the hilltop trembling. The image of that half-human, half-beast pacing in the dim light stayed with me. And I knew some shapes do not rest, even when unseen. Fog lay thick across the forest floor, curling around roots and stones. My boots sank into the damp soil, the mist clinging to my legs, cold and wet. The air smelled of wet pine and earth, heavy and still. I thought I was alone. The forest was quiet, almost impossibly quiet, aside from the faint hum of dripping water. Even the wind held its breath. Then I noticed them, figures moving in the fog, just beyond the reach of sight. I couldn't see them clearly, only the vague outline of bodies. Tall, lean, shifting silently between trees. I froze. My heartbeat drummed in my ears. No footsteps, no rustling leaves, nothing to mark their passage. And yet, I could hear breathing, soft, deliberate, echoing from all directions. The fog thickened, wrapping around me. Shapes emerged, then vanished, slipping between trunks, circling the trail. Each exhale from the pack felt closer, pressing against my skin, cold and moist. I tried to step back. A branch brushed my arm, though no one was there. The fog swallowed it as quickly as it came. My pulse rattled in my chest. The figures moved closer, yet remained silent. The forest seemed to hum around them, an invisible rhythm guiding their approach. Every shadow shifted unnaturally, stretching and bending, echoing the shapes I could barely make out. I swallowed hard. The smell reached me next, wet fur, damp earth, a faint copper tang. It was animal, yet too precise, too controlled, deliberate. Something intelligent lingered in it. I dare not breathe too loudly. Every exhale seemed to carry my location to the pack. I pressed my back against a tree, chest tight, eyes scanning the fog. They didn't step forward. They didn't retreat. They simply waited. Time stretched. The fog shifted and swirled, revealing movement just at the corner of my vision. I could see limbs flex, heads tilt, bodies crouched low, but always silent, always observing. Minutes or hours passed. The forest held its breath with me. The pack never attacked, never revealed itself fully. Only their presence lingered, patient and inescapable, like a shadow that follows even when the source is unseen. I left the trail eventually. The fog swallowed the path behind me, hiding them from sight. But I could still feel their gaze, soft and persistent, pressing into my back. The silent pack was there, waiting, always waiting. The forest was quiet, wrapped in a fog that clung to every branch and root. My boots pressed into damp leaves, soft and slippery beneath me. The air smelled of wet wood and moss, heavy and cold against my skin. A faint glow appeared ahead. At first, I thought it was firelight, but it floated, drifting between the branches like a will-o'-the-wisp. A lantern, pale and steady, moving with no visible hand to hold it. Curiosity pressed me forward. I followed slowly, careful not to make a sound. The mist curled around my ankles, hiding roots and stones, and every snap of twig beneath my boots felt amplified in the stillness. The lantern moved effortlessly, between trees, above moss-covered logs, always just beyond the edge of reach. I thought it might guide me somewhere, but the trail it led to seemed wrong, twisted, unfamiliar. Then I saw them, clawed footprints, fresh and deep, etched into the wet soil beneath the lantern's glow. They led backward, toward the trail I had come from. The claws pressed sharply into the mud, deliberate, precise, as if something had tested each step. I slowed, heart hammering in my chest. The fog thickened, swallowing the lantern at times, then revealing again, drifting between branches, patient. The forest felt alive around me, watching. I could hear my own breathing, ragged in the damp air. The scent of wet fur, metallic and strong, crept toward me. Each exhale of mine seemed to carry sound, yet the forest remained silent except for the occasional drip of water from high branches. The lantern paused, a glow suspended in darkness, revealing nothing, showing everything. I noticed a clawed print circling slightly, almost forming a pattern. They pressed the earth with intent. They observed. I stepped closer. The fog seemed to swirl, curling around my legs, but the lantern drifted just out of reach. Its light painted long, twisting shadows across trunks, and in each flicker, the claws seemed sharper, more deliberate. I realized then that the trail did not lead me forward. It led me back, toward the path I had already walked, toward the things that had left the prints, things that now watched in the trees. The lantern drifted higher, disappearing into the thick fog. The clawed footprints remained, pressed into the mud as if frozen in place. I did not linger. I left the forest quickly, boots squelching, breath heavy, and the memory of pale light drifting between branches lingered long after. The river ran low, sluggish, its surface dark and glassy. Mist curled along the bank, clinging to rocks and roots, and the air smelled faintly of wet stone and algae. I followed the edge, boots sinking slightly into soft mud, each step silent against a hush of water. Then I saw them, carvings in stone, half-wolf faces etched deep along the riverbank. Each one seemed to watch, snarling frozen in the rock, warning me to turn back. I knelt to touch them. The stone was cold, damp, and sharp under my fingers, as if it still remembered the claws that made it. A wind rose, carrying the smell of musk and wet fur. The river's surface rippled, though no breeze moved across it. I stepped back, heart tightening. The carvings seemed to pulse in the pale light, shadows shifting across their frozen faces. Night fell faster than I expected. The riverbank darkened, mist rising thick and white, curling around my boots. And then I heard them, voices low and broken mingle with growls. They were close, whispering to the fog, fragmented words that tug at the edge of comprehension. Each syllable stretched unnaturally, half human, half animal. I wanted to run, but my feet felt rooted to the damp earth. The mist twisted around me, and the whispers drew nearer, circling, searching. The carvings seemed to lean, shadows deepening within their jagged mouths. I tried to leave. Every step I took forward, the whispers pressing behind, pulling, curling around my ears and throat. The river reflected pale light in ripples, showing shapes just beneath the surface. Something moved, though I could not see it clearly, only feel the weight of it. Minutes or hours passed. The voices faded, leaving only the soft murmur of water against stone. The carvings remained, their half-wolf faces staring, patient and unyielding. I did not dare touch them again. By dawn, the mist thinned, the river calmed once more. The whispers had vanished, leaving silence that pressed against my chest. The carvings still glowed faintly in the pale morning light, and I understood then, with a sinking certainty, that the warnings were not empty. Some paths are marked for one reason, and this riverbank remembered all who ignored them. The valley lay still beneath me, shadows stretching across the slopes. Evening had softened the edges of mountains, pale light folding into darkness. The air smelled faintly of damp grass and stone, cool against my skin. At first, it was just a howl, soft, rolling across the valley like distant wind through the trees. I paused, boots pressing into loose gravel, listening. It was familiar in a way that made my stomach tighten. Then it changed. The howl twisted, warped, stretching into something else, something almost human, and I heard it. My name. I froze. Each repetition grew sharper, more deliberate. The echo bounced from ridge to ridge, wrapping around me, pressing my name into the damp air. The forest around me seemed to hold its breath. Leaves hung motionless. Branches stopped their creaking. Only the howl, my name, and the valley beyond. I tried to answer, softly, nothing more than a whisper. The echo returned, sharper, twisted, and unmistakable. It wasn't just a voice. It was intent, aware, patient. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the slope, following me in ways that made no sense. A rock shifted under my hand, and I jerked my fingers back, feeling the chill of stone beneath my skin. The howl persisted, rolling, bending, layered with an edge that felt like teeth scraping bone. The wind rose, brushing across the valley, carrying the sound closer. I could feel it in my chest, vibrating, tugging at the corners of my mind. It wasn't just a name anymore. It was a command, an invitation, a warning. I stepped forward, heart hammering. The slope was slick, loose gravel sliding beneath my boots. Each step echoed my own name, repeating, twisting in the distance, a chorus of one voice multiplied, layered with something human and not. I wanted to run, but every movement only seemed to pull the howl closer. It followed me down the valley, shaping itself around my pace, an invisible hand pressing at the back of my neck. Night fell fully, the shadows folding into each other. The valley went quiet for a heartbeat, and then the howl returned, insistent, deliberate. My name stretched and twisted in the dark. I could not see it, could not find it, and yet I knew it waited, patient, close enough to touch. And it would call again. The clearing was small, tucked between thick pine and shadow boulders. I stepped carefully over roots and wet leaves, boots heavy with mud. The air smelled of smoke, faint and lingering, but no fire burned here now. Tents remained, stretched tight against the wind, flaps swaying slightly. At first glance, everything seemed normal, but the closer I looked, the more I realized it was not. Inside, the tents were shredded, canvas ripped, flaps torn as if something had clawed and tugged. Sleeping bags were slashed open, gear scattered, soaked from dew and rain. A lingering musk clung to the air, wet fur, earthy and sharp. I stepped cautiously into the main clearing. The ground was soft from rain, footprints fading into mud, but some shapes lingered, impressions too deep, too large to be human. They circled the campsite in a way that felt deliberate, careful, almost ritualistic. The forest was silent. No bird called. No wind stirred. Even the soft drip of water from pine needles seemed muted. It was as if the world held its breath, watching. I knelt to examine a patch of torn canvas. Fingers pressed into wet fabric, feeling the teeth marks along the fibers. A shiver ran through me. Something had been here, patient and precise, moving with intent. I stood, boots squelching in mud, and scanned the clearing again. Shadows moved just beyond the tree lean. Subtle shifts that vanished when I blinked. The air was thick with anticipation, tension pressing softly against my skin. I wanted to leave, but my curiosity held me. Each step brought a new sign. Scratched logs, flattened grass, impressions of something crouched low, waiting. The forest smelled of damp earth and fear, mixing in a way I could not shake. Minutes stretched. The campsite remained untouched by humans, but utterly destroyed, a silent warning carved into every surface. I dared not make a sound. Every breath seemed to echo in the quiet, carrying my presence to whatever lingered nearby. I finally turned away, leaving the tents behind. The musk and wet fur followed in memory, pressing against my mind long after the clearing disappeared. I knew something had been patient, deliberate, and it had watched me, and I would not forget the abandoned campsite, or the quiet terror that lingered in its ruined canvas. The trail was narrow, slick with rain, winding through the dense forest. Branches hung low, dripping, brushing against my arms as I moved. The air smelled of wet bark and moss, heavy and still. I noticed it first with a snap. A branch yanked violently, as if pulled by unseen hands. It sprang back immediately, hitting nothing, and yet something had left a mark, claw marks, deep and jagged, etched into the bark. Fresh, though it smelled faintly of sap, sharp and metallic. No tracks led away, no evidence of anything that could have made them. I took a step forward, and another branch whipped toward me. I ducked, boots slipping in mud, hands brushing damp leaves. Then it snapped back again, leaving another mark. Pattern, precise, deliberate. The forest was quiet around me. No wind, no bird, no rustle, only the soft drip of water from needles. Yet I felt it, something watching, pulling, waiting for me to notice. I pressed forward cautiously. Every snapped branch left more claw marks along the trail, stretching across trunks and roots, jagged streaks that seemed almost impatient. The air tasted faintly of iron and wet earth. Time stretched, minutes or hours, I couldn't tell. Each snap of a branch made my heart lurch, echoing through the stillness like a warning. The marks appeared closer together, following my steps, mirroring my movements with uncanny awareness. I stopped. The forest held its breath. Every branch, every tree seemed to tremble with unseen energy. The claw marks were now everywhere, a record of motion I could not trace. A final snap echoed sharply behind me. I turned, eyes scanning the dense foliage. Nothing moved, yet the air pressed against my skin differently, heavier, tense. I left the trail quickly. Mud squelched under boots. Leaves slapped against my legs. But I did not look back. Even from a distance, I could see the marks, etched deep, a reminder that something had followed, unseen, deliberate, leaving its patience carved into every tree along the path. The forest was quiet, the canopy thick above, letting only pale shafts of light touch the damp ground. I wandered slowly, boots sinking into soft earth, leaves clinging to my ankles. The air smelled of moss and decay, heavy and still. That's when I saw it. A hollow tree, wide enough to step inside. I crouched, peering into the dark cavity, shadows pooling deep within. A face stared back, pale, too pale, with teeth that were long and sharp, grinning in a way that didn't belong to any human I knew. The eyes were wide, unblinking, reflecting the faint light that spilled into the hollow. I froze. The air seemed to thicken, pressing against my skin. My breath came out in clouds, each one visible in the dim light. The face did not move, yet the sense of awareness was absolute. I blinked. When I opened my eyes again, it was gone. The hollow was empty. I thought I imagined it, but the hollow felt colder than the surrounding air, heavier, patient. I stepped closer, curiosity and fear battling inside me. The bark of the tree was rough against my hands, sap sticky and sharp-smelling. I pressed my ear to the hollow. Silence. Then, just as I turned away, a shadow flickered across the edge of the cavity. A subtle movement, almost teasing, and I knew the face had not truly left. It lingered, patient, hiding, waiting for the light to shift again. I walked on, boots soft against wet leaves. The forest hummed quietly, every sound amplified by the stillness. Branches creaked, distant, almost like whispers. The hollow in its face remained in my mind, pale and patient, a reminder that some eyes see even when you cannot see them. The sun shifted, fog curling between the trees. Every shadow seemed heavier now, more deliberate. I did not return to that hollow, but sometimes when the wind is still, I can feel those teeth watching just beyond the edge of light. The morning fog hung low along the trail. Each step pressed into soft earth, boots leaving shallow impressions. The air smelled of damp leaves and moss, cold against my skin. I noticed at first small clouds of breath drifting across the path. They were not mine. Each puff hung in the air, pale and misty, rising and fading too slowly to be normal. I paused, listening. No footsteps, no rustle, nothing to mark the presence of anyone or anything else. Yet the clouds of breath continued, rising in rhythm along the trail. A path led deeper into the fog, and the breath seemed to guide it, curling and shifting with unseen energy. Curiosity pulled me forward. I followed, careful, boots soft against wet soil. The mist pressed against my legs, curling into shapes that vanished when I blinked. Every breath cloud ahead hovered, suspended, like someone or something was walking just out of sight. The air smelled faintly metallic, sharp and damp. I could hear nothing but my own heartbeat, echoing in my ears, and the occasional drop of water sliding from high branches. I stopped at a bend. The breath formed a circle there, dense, curling in the fog. I stepped closer. It swirled around me, cold, invasive, almost sentient. The trail led deeper, and I felt compelled to follow, though every instinct warned me to turn back. Shadows stretched between the trees, bending unnaturally in the fog. Every step I took left my own mist behind, mixing with the trail that was not mine. It led into thicker fog, where shapes shifted just beyond sight, and the feeling of being watched pressed heavily against my skin. I wanted to stop, to turn, but my legs moved as if guided. Each cloud of breath was deliberate, a marker left by something unseen. I could feel its presence, patient and calm, curling through the fog, waiting for me to reach the center. Eventually, the trail ended, or perhaps it never truly ended. The fog was thick, white and heavy, curling around rocks and roots. The breath clouds lingered, rising and twisting, and I realized that whatever had walked here before me had left more than footprints. It had left itself. The fire crackled low, its glow trembling across the clearing. Shadows stretched long across the forest floor, bending and folding with the flicker. The air smelled of smoke and damp earth, cool against my skin. At first, I noticed a wolf. Its shadow stretched unnaturally long over rocks and roots, tail flicking in the firelight. I thought it was just the angle, a trick of flame and dark. But then it moved differently. The shadow shifted, lifting upright. Legs straightened, shoulders rising, arms bending in ways that were human. The silhouette mirrored a human stance, yet remained unmistakably wolf-like. I froze, breath coming out in short, visible clouds, mixing with the evening mist. The firelight danced across the shadow, revealing subtle jerks in its movement. It was alive, deliberate, aware. The forest went still. Even the wind seemed to pause, leaves holding their breath. The shadow stretched closer to me, though nothing else approached. The ground beneath remained empty, silent. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of light. The fire flickered. Shadows leapt and twisted. Everything could be imagined, but the shape remained upright, deliberate, studying me, patient and calm. A branch snapped somewhere behind me. I spun, but saw nothing, only the empty forest, fog curling around trunks. When I looked back, the shadow had shifted slightly closer, mirroring the movements of someone standing, waiting. I stepped back slowly, heart thudding. The shadow did not waver. It followed, unhurried, stretching, bending, alive in the firelight. Every flicker revealed arms, hands, almost reaching. I blew out the fire. Darkness swallowed the clearing instantly. The shadow vanished, or perhaps merged with the night. I could still feel its presence pressing softly in the air, upright, patient, watching. I left the clearing, boots heavy, every step echoing in the silent forest. Even as I walked away, I knew the shadow had not left. It remained, waiting where firelight could not reach, stretching upright in the dark. The ravine yawned beneath me, steep walls dark and slick with rain. A chill clung to the air, carrying the scent of wet stone and moss. The forest around was hushed, only the drip of water echoing softly against the cliffside. Then I heard it, a scream, tearing through the quiet, half animal, half human. It echoed across the gorge, ricocheting between the jagged walls. And it did not stop. I pressed myself against a tree, boots sinking into soft mud. The scream came again, layered, tangled. 2 voices, or perhaps 20, fused into one. It stretched, twisted, lingering long after the initial sound had ended. The fog thickened at the bottom of the ravine, curling upward, hiding the source. My breath came fast, mist curling in front of me. The echo of screams pressed against my chest, vibrating, shaping the air itself. I wanted to move closer, to see, to understand. But each step seemed to draw the sound nearer, sharper, closer where I stood. The forest and the ravine seemed alive, vibrating with something ancient, patient, waiting. I could smell something sharp, metallic, carried on the mist, wet fur, iron, the tang of fear. Branches brushed against my face as I stumbled back, yet the echoes followed, pressing from every direction, impossible to escape. Time lost meaning. The screams continued, tearing and twisting, then fading into silence that was heavier, denser than the sound had been. I stood frozen, listening to nothing, feeling the air hum where the voices had lingered. Eventually, the forest returned to its muted rhythm. Only the faint drip of water remained, echoing softly. But the memory of the screams, tangled and impossible, pressed into my mind like the ravine itself had carved it there. I did not linger. The gorge swallowed the echoes, yet I knew they would return, hidden, patient, waiting for another soul to listen. The trail narrowed as I approached the old trapline, winding through thick pine and damp undergrowth. Rust clung to the air, sharp and metallic, mixing with the earthy scent of wet soil. The forest felt heavier here, quiet in a way that pressed against my chest. Rusty traps lined the path. Some snapped, teeth jagged and twisted, tufts of fur still caught in the metal, glistening wet. I knelt, fingers brushing the edges, feeling the cold bite of iron and the slick texture of fur. The trail seemed to hum with something unseen, patient, waiting. Branches overhead swayed slightly, though no wind passed through. A low, almost imperceptible vibration ran along the ground beneath my boots. I walked slowly, careful to avoid the jagged traps. Each step pressed into soft earth, and yet I could feel eyes tracking me, lingering, shifting just beyond sight. The fur in the trap smelled strong, earthy, musk-heavy, like something had only just passed. I noticed movement in the shadows between trees, subtle, deliberate, branches bent, leaves brushing softly. But nothing emerged fully, nothing solid to mark its presence. Still, the forest hummed with awareness. The trap seemed almost deliberate now, laid with intention, as if guiding, testing, marking a path for something unseen. I followed, boots careful, breath held, heart thudding in rhythm with the quiet tension. A snapping twig behind me made me flinch. Nothing appeared, yet the hair on my neck rose, and I felt the weight of patient eyes tracking, observing every motion. I left the trapline quickly, mud squelching beneath my boots, but the scent of wet fur and rust lingered in my mind, pressing a reminder that the forest had its rules. The old traps remained, patient and silent, waiting for the next wanderer to step too carelessly into their careful design. Rain fell hard, hammering the canopy and drumming against my jacket. The forest was slick, leaves glistening, mud sucking at my boots. The air smelled of wet pine and earth, sharp and cold, clinging to my skin. Through the sheets of rain, I saw it, a tall figure moving between the trees, distant, indistinct. Lightning flashed, illuminating its outline, half man, half beast, shifting unnaturally, jerking with each step. I froze. The thunder rolled, masking my shallow breaths. Every flash of lightning brought it closer, closer in shape and presence. Its form blurred at the edges, a smear of dark and motion impossible to define. Branches whipped against my arms as I moved, slick with rain. I could hear water dripping from leaves, but something heavier pressed through the forest. The figure didn't hurry. It paced, patient, deliberate, always just beyond the visibility of the storm. I pressed forward slowly, trying to keep the figure in sight. The smell hit then, wet fur, iron, earth churned with metallic tang. It was alive, aware, and following its own rhythm through the rain. Every lightning strike revealed its face for a heartbeat. Jagged features, half human, half animal, eyes glinting with intelligence and patience. Each flash pulled a shiver through my spine, and I realized it was closer than I had thought, closing the distance silently. The forest floor squelched beneath me. Branches snapped softly, dripping water over my shoulders. The figure paused at one point, head tilting in an unnerving mimic of curiosity. And then it moved again, closer, still silent, blending with the storm. I did not run. I could not. Every instinct warned me. But I could not leave the sight, could not look away from the shifting outline that blurred the line between man and beast. Eventually, the rain eased, mist curling in the pale light. The figure vanished between the trees, leaving only the memory of motion, the smell of wet fur, and the echo of something patient, deliberate, and alive. Fog rolled low across the forest, thick and pale, curling around tree trunks and roots. Each step I took pressed into soft earth, mud clinging to my boots. The air smelled damp, of moss and wet bark, heavy and cold against my skin. Then I noticed them, eyes, glowing faintly, amber and still, suspended in the mist. At first, only one, then two, and as the fog shifted, more appeared, circling, multiplying, their gaze holding mine from the shadows. I froze. The forest seemed to hum, breathless and waiting. Branches pressed close, leaves dripping softly, and the fog carried a faint metallic tang, like earth turned and clawed. The eyes moved with the fog, drifting closer, but nothing solid emerged. They glowed and vanished, appearing just beyond the edge of vision, layered, patient, watching. I stepped forward, careful, boots soft against wet soil. Every breath I took seemed louder, carrying my presence into the hollow mist. The eyes followed, patient, aware, moving with a slow intelligence. A shadow passed briefly between the trunks. I spun, heart hammering, but the forest held only fog and silence. The eyes were everywhere, yet nowhere, shifting with the mist, circling the trail, patient and deliberate. I tried to leave, turning back along the path I had come, but the fog swirled, dense and curling, masking the trail. The eyes stayed, holding, floating, unblinking, until I could feel them pressing, soft, constant, through the hollow fog. I walked on, boots heavy, hands brushing damp leaves, never looking away, never stopping. The forest hummed quietly around me, alive with unseen watchers. And I knew, even as the fog thinned, that the eyes remained patient, waiting for the next shadow to appear. The trail was narrow, mud soft beneath my boots, winding through thick undergrowth. The air smelled of wet leaves and decaying wood, heavy and cold. Rain had fallen recently, and the forest floor squelched with every step. I saw it first on the edge of the path. A deer carcass lying unnatural. Still, no scavengers had touched it. Its fur was matted, damp, and a faint copper tang clung to the air. The antlers caught my eye, twisted, broken, claw-like, as if shaped by intent rather than accident. I knelt, brushing fingers over the smooth, splintered wood. The forest was silent, the only sound my shallow breathing mixing with the occasional drip from high branches. Something moved just beyond the trees. I turned sharply, but saw nothing, only mist curling between trunks. The carcass felt alive in a way that made my stomach tighten, its twisted antlers reaching into shadow, unnatural in shape and presence. I stepped closer, mud pressing to my boots, leaves clinging wet against my legs. The air smelled faintly of musk, sharp and lingering, like something had been here recently. I felt watched, patient eyes pressing from the darkness just beyond sight. The forest seemed to shift, branches bending slightly, shadows stretching longer than possible. Every rustle, every whisper of movement felt deliberate. I could not shake the feeling that the antlers themselves were a warning, a marker left by something that stalked these trails, unseen but aware. I left the deer behind, stepping carefully, boots squelching through mud. Even as the path opened and light reached the canopy, the image of twisted, claw-like antlers pressed into my mind. The forest smelled of earth and fur, damp and alive, and I knew that some shapes leave reminders long after they are gone. The trailhead was quiet, empty, the forest pressing close on either side. Morning light sifted through the trees, pale and thin, glancing off wet leaves. The air smelled faintly of pine and damp earth, crisp and still. I noticed it before I reached the clearing. A tall figure stood at the edge of the trail, unmoving. Its shape was too rigid, too deliberate, a silhouette that didn't quite belong. I blinked. When I opened my eyes again, it was closer. Not by walking, I realized, closer in the space between blinks, shrinking the distance in silence. I stopped, heart pounding softly, ears straining for the faintest sound. There was none, no footfall, no rustle, only the quiet of the trailhead and my own shallow breaths. The figure remained, patient and still, observing. The forest pressed closer around me, branches brushing lightly, but nothing moved toward the figure. Yet its presence felt immense, pressing through the air, shaping the space around it. I stepped back, then forward, testing the distance. Every blink brought it nearer. I could see shoulders now, unnaturally broad, shadows stretching across the mossy ground. Its head tilted slightly, as if curious, deliberate, aware. I tried to speak, softly, a whisper into the morning. No sound left my lips. The watcher remained patient, unmoving but closer, insistent, pressing against my chest in silence. I turned and walked slowly onto the trail. Each step echoed softly in the still forest, and when I glanced back, the figure had not shifted. Yet it felt closer. It always felt closer. The trail stretched ahead, pale light filtering through leaves. I kept moving, every sense alert, aware that something waited at the edge of vision, patient, deliberate, always observing. The trail stretched ahead, wet and slick with recent rain. Mist curled around roots and stones, clinging to my boots and jacket. The forest smelled of damp earth and pine, heavy and thick in the cool air. Then I heard them, footsteps, heavy, deliberate, running behind me. I spun, heart hammering, but the trail was empty. Only my own boots squelched in the mud. I started walking faster. The footsteps followed, matching my pace exactly. They were too heavy to be mine, too deliberate, yet each step stopped when I stopped, resumed when I did. The forest pressed close, branches brushing against my arms, leaves dripping onto my shoulders. Every sense screamed that something was there, but I could see nothing, only shadows twisting in the mist. I ran. Mud flew beneath my boots. Leaves slapped my legs. The footsteps ran with me, echoing, patient, deliberate. I tried to look back. Nothing, yet I could feel it, pressing closer with every stride. Branches snapped softly, then silence. I dared to glance behind. Still nothing visible, but the rhythm continued, synchronized with my own heartbeat. I realized then I could not outrun it, and the footsteps would not abandon me. The trail wound on, curving into thick fog. I stopped briefly, gasping, and the footsteps stopped too. I held my breath, listening. Every exhale seemed loud in the heavy, humid air. Slowly I walked again. The footsteps resumed, shadowed, patient, following me without fail, always there, just beyond sight, pressing on the edges of the forest and my mind. I could not see it. I could only feel it, and it would not stop. The forest grew dense, the canopy thick above, filtering the pale light into dim patches on the ground. I followed the trail carefully, boots pressing into damp soil, leaves clinging wet around my ankles. The air smelled of moss and earth, heavy and still. Then I saw it, trees bent inward, forming a perfect circle, branches intertwined overhead, blocking the light, leaving the clearing shadowed and quiet. I stepped inside. The ground was soft, mud pressed with prints that did not belong to me. Pawprints, large, deliberate, twisting into human-shaped impressions, merging into one another. I knelt, tracing the edge of my fingers. The mud was cold, damp, sticky, as if the earth itself remembered every step. The forest around me was silent. No bird called. No wind moved through the bent branches. Even the drip of water seemed muted, swallowed by the shadows. I felt eyes on me, patient, waiting from the outer edges of the circle. The paw prints curved, curling back toward themselves, creating a pattern I could not decipher. Every inch of the clearing pulsed with a quiet presence, deliberate and aware. I stepped carefully through the mud, boots squelching softly. The prints followed me in memory, circling endlessly, as if the clearing itself was alive, shaping and reshaping with invisible hands. A low rustle made me spin. Nothing moved, only shadows shifting between trunks. The pattern of prints seemed to deepen, pressing into the earth, marking the forest in ways I could not understand. I left the circle slowly, careful not to disturb the prints further. Even as I walked away, the image remained pressed into my mind. The forest smelled of wet moss and faint musk, lingering and patient. I knew the circle would wait, shaping paw prints into human forms, and I would never forget the deliberate design of something unseen. The clearing was small, quiet, surrounded by tall pines that blocked the pale light. I knelt on damp earth, striking flint to start a fire. Smoke curled slowly upward, mingling with the mist that hugged the ground. The air smelled of wet pine, earth, and faint ash pressing softly against my skin. The flames flickered low, casting long shadows across the clearing. At first, I thought I was alone, but then I saw them, silhouettes gathering at the edge of the firelight. Low, crouched patient. They did not move toward me. They did not make a sound. I held my breath. Each flicker revealed more. Figures stretching into the darkness, watching, their shapes blending with the shadows of the forest. I could feel their gaze, patient, deliberate, pressing into my chest. The fire popped softly, embers rising, casting their crouched forms in brief light, then letting them vanish again into darkness. The air smelled of damp earth and fur, metallic and sharp. I wanted to speak, to call out, but the sound stuck in my throat. Every exhale felt heavy, as if it carried weight into the forest. The silhouettes remained patient, unblinking, aware of every subtle movement I made. I poked at the fire, flames dancing higher, casting long, trembling shadows across the clearing. And still they crouched, waiting, watching, blending into the darkness, silent and deliberate. Time seemed to stretch. Minutes or hours passed. I could not tell. The firelight flickered, embers drifting, and the forest pressed in, heavy, aware. Eventually, the flames died lower, smoke curling thinner into the fog. I left the clearing quietly, boots soft on damp earth. The silhouettes did not follow. They remained crouched, patient, deliberate, waiting in the shadow for the next light to flicker. Dawn broke slowly, pale light stretching across the misty valley. The forest was still, dew clinging to leaves, earth damp beneath my boots. The air smelled of wet pine and cold stone, crisp and heavy in the quiet. Then I heard it, a howl rising from the valley below. Low at first, distant, almost a whisper, but it was too close, too human, twisted, and deliberate. The sound lingered, rolling across the slopes, carrying through fog and hollow. It stretched long, patient, pressing into the morning air. I could feel it vibrating through the earth, soft and insistent, touching places unseen, pressing against my chest. Shadows shifted as the sun rose, pale light revealing mist curling over rocks and roots. The howl continued, layered, deliberate, a presence calling attention to itself, aware, patient. I wanted to move, to leave the valley, but the sound held me in place, rooted, aware of every heartbeat, every shallow breath. It was close enough to hear my name, though I did not know if it intended to call or to warn. The forest around me seemed to pause, holding its breath. Leaves hung motionless. Fog curled and twisted, and the howl pressed on, lingering, refusing to fade. Eventually, the light strengthened, brightening the mist, but the sound remained, echoing across the valley, a promise, patient and deliberate, that whatever had howled would return, waiting in shadow, watching the fog, always near, always aware. I stepped forward, boots pressing into soft earth, leaving the valley behind, but the echo of that final howl followed, soft, insistent, impossible to forget.